The crash report connected to Paul Walker contains one number that never seems to settle.
From the very beginning, the same incident produced two different conclusions about speed. One official account suggested the car was traveling at more than 100 miles per hour. A later investigation, using deeper reconstruction and technical analysis, presented a noticeably lower range. Both conclusions came from credible authorities. Both were presented as factual. So which one reflects what truly happened on that road? And if neither report was careless, what changed between the first estimate and the final conclusion? To understand why this single number continues to raise doubts years later, we have to go back to the setting of that day. The truth may not have changed, but the way it was recorded clearly did. Paul Walker was not behind the wheel that afternoon. He was seated as a passenger, trusting the person driving beside him. The driver was not inexperienced or reckless by reputation. He was known as someone familiar with high-performance vehicles and comfortable handling powerful cars. The Porsche Carrera GT itself was a demanding machine, built for precision and speed, but also known for being difficult to control without absolute focus. Importantly, the vehicle was legally registered and being driven on a public road without any organized race or competition. There was no indication of illegal street racing. Everything about the situation appeared ordinary, at least on the surface. And if every visible element was lawful and routine, then the question does not point to what they were doing, but to what went wrong. In the hours that followed the crash, media coverage moved quickly. Headlines formed before investigators had completed a full reconstruction of the scene. Early reports repeated estimates of speed drawn from initial assessments and unnamed sources. Those figures spread rapidly, shaping public perception almost immediately. Few articles paused to explain that early numbers are often provisional, based on incomplete data. As later analyses emerged, using physical evidence and technical modeling, the earlier figures remained lodged in memory. Numbers that appear too quickly often carry more weight than they deserve, and once released, they are rarely reconsidered with the same attention as the final findings. For many people, Paul Walker was inseparable from the image of speed. Years of film rolls built a public association between his name and fast cars, loud engines, and high-risk driving. That image lingered far beyond the screen. When news of the crash broke, many observers reached for the simplest explanation. Speed felt obvious. It matched the persona they thought they knew. This assumption settled in quickly, even before facts were fully gathered. In the public mind, the story was already written. But investigation does not operate on impressions or reputation. It moves slowly, filtering emotion out of the process. And that gap between image and evidence would shape everything that followed. The crash was not the first time a high-performance vehicle ended in tragedy. There had been other incidents involving powerful sports cars, skilled drivers, and sudden loss of control. In many of those cases, early reporting followed a familiar pattern. A dramatic outcome was reduced to a single cause: too fast, too powerful, too risky. These explanations were easy to understand and easy to repeat. They spared audiences from dealing with complexity. Over time, this habit trained the public to expect a simple answer, even when reality was layered. Once that pattern is established, any new case tends to be filtered through it almost automatically. The Porsche Carrera GT carried its own history of technical discussion. Engineers and drivers had long noted that it demanded precision and respect. It was built with extreme power and limited electronic assistance compared to newer designs. Reports later mentioned that the tires on the vehicle were old and no longer in peak condition. Combined with the car's raw performance, this created an environment where small variables mattered. These facts were real and documented. But technical warnings describe potential risk, not a guaranteed outcome. A demanding machine does not cause an accident by itself, and mechanical complexity alone does not explain a specific moment on a specific road. Another layer of confusion came from the difference between forensic conclusions and accident reconstruction. Forensic analysis focuses on the result. It examines injuries, damage, and physical aftermath. Accident reconstruction works backward. It relies on measurements, road marks, vehicle data, and video evidence. Both aim to uncover truth, but they approach it from opposite directions. Because of this, their early findings can appear to conflict. One speaks in broad outcomes, the other refines details over time. Two methods, one objective, yet they do not always produce the same number at the same stage. In the days leading up to the crash, there was nothing to suggest an unusual risk. There were no reports of aggressive plans, no indication of a test run, or deliberate push beyond limits. The outing itself appeared casual and routine. That normalcy is what unsettles many observers. Accidents are easier to accept when warning signs are obvious. Here, there were none that stood out. No buildup, no clear trigger. And it is precisely this sense of ordinary circumstances that makes the final moment harder to explain and the lingering questions more persistent. The conflict began with the appearance of two different speed estimates tied to the same crash. Early statements circulated suggesting the vehicle was traveling at more than 100 miles per hour at the moment of impact. That figure spread quickly and was repeated across news outlets. Later, after investigators completed a more detailed reconstruction, a different range emerged. The final conclusion placed the speed between 81 and 94 miles per hour. Both figures came from official channels. Neither was presented as speculation at the time it was released. This overlap created a quiet but persistent tension. If the investigation was careful and methodical, why did the numbers not align? Was one a correction, or were they measuring different things? And if both were technically accurate within their own methods, which one should the public trust as the closest reflection of reality? As these conflicting numbers circulated, public reaction began to split. Some people accepted the first estimate and never moved beyond it. For them, the initial report felt raw and honest, closer to the moment of impact. Others pointed to the later findings, arguing that time and data improve accuracy. They trusted the refined analysis over the early impression. The problem was not disagreement itself. It was the way updates were delivered. Corrections arrived quietly, without the same attention as the original claims. Headlines rarely emphasized revision. As a result, many viewers felt something had been adjusted without explanation. The doubt did not grow from the crash alone. It grew from the sequence of information, and the sense that the story changed without being clearly guided from one conclusion to the next. The most technical part of the investigation focused on how speed was calculated rather than what people felt had happened. Investigators examined tire marks left on the road, paying close attention to their length and curvature. These marks revealed how the car was rotating as it lost control. Security camera footage from nearby locations was reviewed frame by frame to estimate movement over distance. Analysts also studied the angle of yaw, the sideways rotation of the vehicle relative to its direction of travel. Each method added a piece to the picture. None of them worked alone. Together, they formed a model that was far more complex than a single headline number. But this was the section of the report few people ever read. Both speed figures existed because they were produced at different moments in the process. The early estimate came when investigators had limited information and high public pressure. It relied on visual damage, witness impressions, and general assumptions. The later range emerged after data had been collected and tested. Road measurements were confirmed. Video timing was verified. Confidence intervals narrowed. As certainty increased, the number changed. This was not a contradiction so much as a refinement. Yet refinement rarely feels satisfying to an audience that already accepted an earlier conclusion. When certainty grows quietly, it often appears suspicious rather than reassuring. There was a point when major news outlets adjusted their framing. Reports began to reference the lower range as the official conclusion. Language shifted from speculation to reconstruction. The higher estimate slowly disappeared from new articles, though it remained embedded in older coverage. This transition was subtle. There was no clear announcement that a previous assumption had been replaced. Instead, the story evolved without a formal acknowledgement of change. For many readers, the initial impression remained dominant, and once formed, that impression continued to shape how later information was received. Much of the confusion came from how technical terms were interpreted. An estimate was treated as a verdict. A possible range was heard as a definitive claim. Discussions about what could have happened were often understood as statements about what did happen. The difference between likelihood and cause was blurred. As a result, the investigation appeared inconsistent, even when it followed standard procedure. When people are not guided through the process, updates feel like reversals. And reversals feel like something is being hidden, even when nothing is. The true climax of this story is not the discovery of a hidden cause or a suppressed detail. It is the realization that no dramatic reveal ever arrived. Investigators did not uncover sabotage. They did not identify a single mechanical failure that explained everything. They also did not provide a simple narrative that satisfied every question. What they produced was a careful technical explanation that resisted simplification. For many viewers, that restraint was disappointing. Suspicion is more compelling than methodology, but the absence of a neat answer does not mean the presence of deception. In cases like this, technical truth often struggles to compete with doubt, not because it is weaker, but because it is less dramatic. The official report was written with deliberate caution. Its language avoided absolutes and emphasized ranges rather than fixed claims. Nowhere did it state with certainty that the vehicle exceeded 100 miles per hour. Instead, it described speed in terms of probable intervals supported by physical evidence. This approach reflected standard investigative practice, where conclusions are framed by confidence levels rather than dramatic declarations. However, careful wording often sounds evasive to a general audience. When reports do not deliver a single definitive statement, readers may assume something is being withheld. In this case, restraint was interpreted as reluctance. And for some, that caution became a reason to question the integrity of the findings rather than a sign of their rigor. Media coverage followed a different logic. Headlines favored the most striking elements, and early references to extreme speed proved difficult to erase. Even as later articles incorporated updated conclusions, many titles continued to echo the earlier narrative. Detailed explanations were buried deeper in the text, where fewer readers reached them. This imbalance shaped public memory. People remembered the number that shocked them first, not the paragraphs that later refined it. Over time, repetition gave the initial figure a sense of permanence. When audiences encountered revised information, it felt like a correction without context. That gap between headline and substance allowed confusion to persist long after the investigation had settled its conclusions. As the discussion continued, several theories remained in circulation. Some focused on the vehicle itself, pointing to design characteristics or mechanical stress. Others examined the roadway, questioning whether its layout or surface contributed to loss of control. A third line of thought centered on human factors, including decision-making and reaction time. None of these explanations was conclusively proven to stand alone, yet none could be fully dismissed either. Each theory drew strength from what was not explicitly ruled out. In the absence of a single, simple answer, speculation found room to grow. Hypotheses survive not because they are confirmed, but because uncertainty leaves space for them to exist. The inconsistency at the center of this case is often treated as a flaw, but it is better understood as a trace of how investigations actually work. Early estimates emerge under pressure, with limited data and intense public attention. Later conclusions arrive after measurement, comparison, and verification. When those stages are visible side by side, the difference can look suspicious. In reality, it reflects a process unfolding over time rather than a mistake being corrected in secret. The facts did not shift. The confidence behind them did. Each phase carried a different level of certainty, shaped by the information available at that moment. This layered approach is common in serious investigations, even if it rarely feels satisfying to an audience seeking clarity. But not everyone accepts that explanation. For some, any change in an official number feels like a warning sign rather than a natural refinement. This leaves the audience with a choice about how to interpret what remains. Some people hold on to the first number they heard, because it arrived with urgency and emotion. Others prefer the later conclusion, because it was supported by deeper analysis and calmer language. Both reactions are understandable. One trusts instinct and immediacy. The other trusts method and revision. The tension between those instincts is what keeps this story alive. When you consider the evidence, which approach feels more convincing to you? Do you place greater weight on early impressions formed in the chaos of breaking news, or on data assembled slowly after the noise has faded? And when a number changes over time, what truly triggers doubt? Is it the possibility that something is wrong with the facts themselves, or the discomfort of realizing how much our understanding depends on when and how those facts are presented?